Hurricane-force winds over 85 miles per hour and violent swells caught Royal Caribbean's Explorer of the Seas off guard near Tenerife in the Canary Islands, throwing the ship into a sudden, terrifying list that some passengers estimated at 40 to 45 degrees. Bar glasses smashed to the floor. A grand piano slid across the lounge. Terrified passengers, feeling the deck tip sharply beneath them, began texting final messages to loved ones, convinced the ship wouldn't right itself. It did, within minutes, but the footage of the incident, which happened in late 2024, was already spreading fast, and this was no relic of an older era. It was a modern cruise ship, built with the latest stabilization systems available. Now here's the comparison that actually makes sense. Not some century-old relic, but a ship built this century, still sailing today, still crossing the same brutal North Atlantic every single week of the year. The RMS Queen Mary II. Cunard's flagship was designed for exactly the conditions that send modern cruise ships scrambling for calmer water. While megaships increasingly change course to dodge storms, Queen Mary II is scheduled to sail straight through the North Atlantic in January. Statistically, the worst month of the year for weather on that route. And passengers who've done it will tell you the ride is dramatically steadier than anything they've felt on a modern resort ship twice her size. So why does a 20-year-old ocean liner, weighing less and carrying fewer decks than today's giants, handle a storm so differently than a brand new megaship stuffed with computer-controlled stabilizers? The answer has almost nothing to do with age or technology, and everything to do with a single design philosophy naval architects have been arguing about for a century. Do you build a ship to survive the ocean, or to survive in spite of it? By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what separates these two approaches beneath the waterline. Queen Mary II was ordered in 2000 for one specific, unforgiving job: year-round transatlantic crossings between Southampton and New York, in every season, on a fixed schedule, regardless of weather. That single requirement shaped everything about her. She's the only passenger ship built in the last several decades certified to the strict North Atlantic Structural and Stability Standard, a classification that demands a stronger hull, more freeboard, and better seakeeping than an ordinary cruise ship needs. Modern megaships like Royal Caribbean's Icon-class or Oasis-class vessels were designed for the opposite mission: warm weather cruising among the Caribbean, the Mediterranean, and shallow tropical ports, where the priority is fitting as much resort as possible: water parks, glass atriums, 16-plus decks of balconies, onto a hull that still has to squeeze into commercial cruise terminals. Those two missions produce almost opposite ship. Start with draft how deep the hull sits below the waterline. Queen Mary II draws about 10 meters, despite being roughly the same length as Royal Caribbean's Icon of the Seas. That sounds like a small difference from Icon's roughly 9.25-meter draft, but the real gap shows up in mass and density, not just depth. Queen Mary II displaces about 79,000 tons of actual weight for her 149,215 gross tons of enclosed volume, a displacement to tonnage ratio of roughly 0.53. Icon of the Seas, by contrast, packs 250,800 gross tons of volume into a hull that's proportionally far lighter for its size, because so much of that volume is empty air: cabins, atriums, theaters, and promenades stacked upward rather than dense machinery and structure built downward. In plain terms, Queen Mary II is built like a genuine ship: heavy, dense, low-slung. A modern megaship is built more like a floating building: enormous enclosed volume wrapped around a comparatively light, shallow hull. That density matters enormously for how a ship behaves in waves. A heavier, denser hull, sitting deeper in the water, has more inertia and a lower center of gravity relative to its size, so it resists being thrown around by breaking waves. A lighter hull with the same footprint gets pushed and rolled far more easily by the same sea state, even with stabilizers running. The single most important visible difference between Queen Mary II and a modern megaship is the bow. Queen Mary II has a tall, sharply flared bow, one of naval architect Stephen Payne's signature design choices. Engineered specifically to knife through North Atlantic swells and throw spray outward and downward rather than upward and over the forward decks. That flare adds real structural height and strength at the point of the hull that takes the most punishment in a head sea. Modern cruise ships, by comparison, typically use a more vertical, boxier bow, designed to maximize interior deck space rather than to fight waves. A shape that works fine in the calmer, more predictable waters most itineraries are routed through, but that punches into oncoming swells rather than slicing through them, transferring far more shock and motion into the hull and up through the towering superstructure above. Every ship needs a healthy metacentric height, the property that determines how strongly it resists tipping over. Queen Mary II achieves hers largely the traditional way, a relatively narrow beam of 41 meters at the waterline paired with a deep, dense, heavily built hull that keeps mass low. That combination produces a slower, more controlled roll. The ship still moves in a swell, but it moves like something with real weight behind it. Modern megaships achieve similar stability through an entirely different mechanism: extreme beam. Icon of the Seas is roughly 65 meters across at its widest point, nearly 60% wider than Queen Mary II, which provides stability through sheer leverage rather than mass and depth. A wide hull resists tipping the way a wide-based ladder resists tipping, without needing a deep, heavy keel. That works well in calm water and lets the ship enter shallower ports, but it comes at a cost. A wide, shallow, lightly loaded hull is far more exposed to wind pressure and reacts more sharply and unpredictably to a breaking wave hitting it from the side. Precisely the kind of hit that produced the sudden 40-degree list off Tenerife. Queen Mary II stands 72 meters from keel to funnel across 14 passenger decks. Icon of the Seas rises even higher, about 75.6 meters across 20 decks, but with a shallower draft supporting that height. The extra decks stacked above a comparatively thin slice of underwater hull create a pendulum effect. A small roll at the waterline becomes a dramatically amplified swing on the top decks, where balconies, water slides, and glass-walled suites sit. Passengers near the top of a modern megaship experience motion many times more violent than passengers at the same moment on lower decks, simply because they're so much further from the ship's center of rotation. Queen Mary II's lower profile relative to her hull depth keeps her upper decks closer to that center of motion, which is a major reason transatlantic passengers report a steadier ride, even in genuinely severe North Atlantic weather. Modern cruise ships rely heavily on retractable fin stabilizers, hydraulically actuated underwater wings guided by gyroscopic sensors that can cut rolling by up to 90%. It's real, effective engineering. But stabilizers lose effectiveness at low speed, and they do nothing to counter wind pressure pushing on a towering, lightweight superstructure, which is exactly the force that overwhelmed Explorer of the Seas off Tenerife. Because of this limitation, the modern cruise industry leans heavily on satellite weather routing, changing course to avoid storms altogether rather than sailing through them. Queen Mary II carries stabilizers too, but she doesn't depend on them the same way, because her hull was built from the outset to handle the seas she sails through, which is also why Cunard can keep her on a fixed transatlantic schedule 12 months a year, storms included, in a way that would be far riskier for a resort ship optimized for sunny, predictable itineraries. None of this makes modern megaships unsafe. They meet rigorous, carefully calculated international stability standards for their design. But the comparison with Queen Mary II exposes the real trade-off at the heart of cruise ship design. Build a dense, deep, purpose-built hull for genuine ocean crossings, and you get a steadier ride at the cost of shallower ports and less onboard space. Build a wide, tall, comparatively light hull optimized for volume and resort amenities, and you get record-breaking pools, water parks, and balconies, at the cost of a ship that's more sensitive to wind, waves, and the kind of sudden list that goes viral. So the next time you see a cruise ship rocking in a storm, while Queen Mary II quietly crosses the same ocean on schedule, remember, it isn't really about age or technology or how much the ship cost to build. It's about which mission the naval architects were solving for: surviving the sea or living large on top of it.